Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Case Files and press the notification bell so you never miss our latest true crime investigations, unsolved mysteries, and real criminal case stories. Every week, we uncover shocking crimes, hidden evidence, and the disturbing truths behind some of the most infamous cases in history. If you're fascinated by real investigations and mysteries that still haunt investigators today, you're in the right place. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let's dive into tonight's case. December 26, 1996. The day after Christmas. In one of America's wealthiest and most peaceful neighborhoods, a family wakes up inside a beautiful stone house on 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. The presents have already been opened. The tree is still lit. The holiday was everything it was supposed to be. And then a mother walks downstairs. On the bottom step of the staircase, she finds 3 pages of handwritten paper. A ransom note. It says her 6-year-old daughter has been taken by a, quote, small foreign faction. It demands exactly $118,000. It warns her not to call the police. She called the police immediately. Officers arrived within minutes. Friends were called. The house began to fill with people. Everyone assumed the little girl had been taken. Everyone was wrong. Somewhere inside that very house, on that very morning, was a discovery that would shake the nation. A discovery that investigators were not yet looking for. A discovery that would launch one of the longest, most confusing, and most controversial criminal investigations in American history. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey. Stay with us until the very end, because the answer to what happened inside that house may surprise you. Boulder, Colorado in the mid-1990s was the kind of place people moved to because it felt safe. It felt clean. It felt like the kind of town where bad things simply did not happen. And at the center of one of its most admired families was a little girl named JonBenét Ramsey. She was 6 years old. She had her mother's energy and her father's charisma. By all accounts, she was joyful, outgoing, and absolutely full of life. She had also become something of a local celebrity. Beginning at age 4, JonBenét had competed in children's beauty pageants, winning several titles and developing a love for performing. She loved to sing, dance, and be on stage. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, had been a beauty queen herself, Miss West Virginia 1977, and encouraged JonBenet's participation with great enthusiasm. Her father, JonBenét Ramsey, was the founder and CEO of Access Graphics, a computer technology company based in Boulder. By 1996, the company had reached revenues of over $1 billion. John Ramsey was, by any measure, extraordinarily successful. The Ramseys lived in a 6,000-square-foot home in one of Boulder's most desirable neighborhoods. They had money. They had standing. They had a beautiful family. They appeared to have everything. But as investigators would soon discover, the picture-perfect surface of the Ramsey family hid a set of questions that have still not been fully answered to this day. December 25, 1996. Christmas Day. The Ramseys had attended a Christmas party at the home of their friends, the Whites, earlier that evening. JonBenét was reportedly tired and fell asleep in the car on the ride home. John Ramsey carried her into the house. She was put to bed still in her clothes, a Christmas outfit, red turtleneck and black velvet pants. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. The family went to bed. No one who has studied this case can say with certainty what happened in that house between the time JonBenét was put to bed and the time Patsy Ramsey walked downstairs the next morning. That window of time, those dark, quiet hours, is the heart of the mystery. What is known is this: JonBenét Ramsey never woke up. At approximately 5:52 in the morning, Patsy Ramsey came downstairs. On the staircase, she found what she later described as 3 pieces of paper, a handwritten ransom note. The note was unusual in almost every possible way. First, its length. Most ransom notes are short: demand, amount, instructions, done. This one was nearly 3 full pages long. It contained specific language, threats, oddly formal phrasing, and what some investigators later called literary flourishes, as if it had been written by someone who wanted it to sound like a ransom note, rather than someone who actually needed to communicate a ransom demand. Second, the amount. $118,000. A precise number, not a round figure like 100,000, not a dramatic demand like 5 million. Exactly $118,000. Investigators noted this was almost exactly the amount of John Ramsey's annual bonus, a fact that very few people outside the family would have known. Third, the language itself. The note referred to a, quote, small foreign faction. It warned the family not to contact, quote, the FBI or your local law enforcement. It referenced John Ramsey by name. And in a line that struck many investigators as deeply strange, it said, quote, I advise you to be rested, as the delivery will be exhausting, as if whoever wrote it was anticipating a long day of negotiations. Investigators also determined that the note was written inside the Ramsey home, using a notepad and pen that belonged to the Ramseys. This raised an immediate question. If an intruder had taken JonBenét from the house, why would they sit down at a kitchen desk, write 3 pages in longhand, and leave the draft pages behind? Handwriting analysts spent years examining the note. Early analysis suggested that Patsy Ramsey's handwriting bore similarities to the note, though she was never definitively confirmed or cleared as the author. No one else has ever been conclusively identified as the writer. The ransom note remains one of the most analyzed documents in American true crime history. And after nearly 3 decades, investigators still cannot say with certainty who wrote it. Despite the ransom note's explicit warning not to contact police, Patsy Ramsey called 911 immediately after finding it. The call was placed at 5:52 a.m. On the recording, Patsy's voice is high-pitched, shaking, almost impossible to understand at points. She gives the address. She says her daughter has been kidnapped. She says there is a ransom note. What most people do not know is what happens at the very end of that 911 call. According to enhanced audio analysis conducted years later, after Patsy believed she had hung up the phone, voices could still be detected on the line. Audio experts who enhanced the recording claimed to hear a male voice, possibly John Ramsey, saying something that sounded like, quote, we're not speaking to you. And possibly a child's voice. Possibly JonBenet's voice. The audio is disputed. Experts disagree on what, if anything, was said. Boulder police investigators have offered different interpretations over the years. But if a child's voice was captured at the end of that recording, at 5:52 in the morning, it raises questions that no one has ever satisfactorily answered. Officers arrived within minutes. Within the hour, the Ramsey home was filled with Boulder police, family friends, and victim advocates. The assumption was that a child had been kidnapped. Everyone was waiting for a ransom call. But the call never came. From the first hours, investigators noticed things that did not fit the kidnapping narrative. There was no evidence of forced entry. Every door and window appeared to be locked or undamaged, with one exception. A basement window had a broken pane of glass. But the broken glass was covered in undisturbed dust and cobwebs. John Ramsey later acknowledged he had broken that window himself months earlier, after accidentally locking himself out of the house. No footprints were found in the snow outside the house, from either an intruder entering or leaving with a child. No ransom call came. Officers noted that the crime scene had already been compromised before they arrived. Family friends moved through the house freely. People touched surfaces. The kitchen was used. The integrity of the scene was significantly damaged in those first hours, a fact that would haunt the investigation for years. And the search of the house was incomplete. Police had walked through the house. But they had not conducted a thorough, systematic search of every room, every closet, every locked door. A 6-year-old girl was somewhere. And nobody had found her yet. Then, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a detective asked John Ramsey to search the house, to look for anything unusual. John Ramsey went downstairs. The basement of the Ramsey home was divided into several rooms. John Ramsey moved through them. And then he opened a door. Inside a small room that had been latched from the outside, John Ramsey found his daughter. JonBenét Ramsey was deceased. She was covered with a white blanket. Her wrists were bound. There was a cord around her neck. He carried her upstairs. She had not been kidnapped. She had been there the entire time. The case, which had begun as a kidnapping, was now a murder investigation. And the primary crime scene, the Ramsey home itself, had now been walked through by police, friends, and the victim's own parents for over 7 hours. Critical evidence may have already been lost. The autopsy of JonBenét Ramsey was conducted by Boulder County Coroner John Meyer on December 27, 1996, one day after her body was discovered. The findings were deeply troubling. JonBenét had been struck on the head with a blunt object, a blow significant enough to fracture her skull in an 8.5-inch line. She had also been strangled with a garrote, a cord tightened by a broken paintbrush handle that appeared to have been fashioned from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies. The medical examiner also documented evidence of prior physical trauma to JonBenet's body, a finding that remains one of the most sensitive and contested elements of the case. Investigators have never reached a consensus on what that evidence means or when the trauma occurred. Then came the most significant forensic discovery in the case. On JonBenet's underwear, investigators found a small amount of DNA that did not match any member of the Ramsey family. It was from an unknown male. It did not match any known suspect. It did not match any profile in the FBI's National DNA Database. Over the following years, that DNA profile would be tested and retested as technology improved. In 2008, advanced touch DNA analysis confirmed the presence of an unidentified male profile, not matching John Ramsey, not matching any Ramsey family member, not matching any of the known people who had been in the home that Christmas. That DNA profile is still unidentified today. For supporters of the intruder theory, this DNA is the cornerstone of their argument. An unknown person was in that house. An unknown person had contact with JonBenét. That person has never been found. For those who remain skeptical, the question is whether the DNA is evidence of guilt, or merely evidence of contamination in a compromised crime scene. No answer has ever been settled. The Boulder Police Department's handling of the JonBenét Ramsey investigation has been criticized extensively, by outside experts, former investigators, and even by those who worked on the case themselves. The failure to secure the crime scene in the first hours remains the most consistent criticism. The house was treated initially as a kidnapping scene, not a murder scene. By the time investigators understood what they were dealing with, the scene had been irrevocably altered. The decision not to immediately separate and formally interview John and Patsy Ramsey, standard procedure in the death of a child, was another point of failure. The Ramseys were allowed to leave the city with family. Formal police interviews did not take place until months later. The investigation also became caught in a conflict between the Boulder Police Department and the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, two agencies that, according to multiple accounts, stopped cooperating with each other. Documents were withheld. Decisions were disputed. The breakdown was significant enough that investigators brought in from outside the city described it as unlike anything they had ever seen. And then there was the media. The JonBenét Ramsey case became a national obsession almost immediately. The combination of a photogenic child, a wealthy family, Christmas, and an unsolved murder was irresistible to tabloid and mainstream press alike. John and Patsy Ramsey appeared on CNN. They were questioned publicly. They were vilified in newspapers. And the presumption of guilt, particularly toward Patsy, spread widely through media coverage long before any formal charges had been considered. The Ramseys maintained their innocence. They hired attorneys, which drew further suspicion. They cooperated in formal interviews, but on their own schedule. They passed polygraph tests administered by their own examiner, though the Boulder police never officially accepted those results. In 1999, a grand jury was convened. After 18 months of deliberation, the grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death and being accessories to a crime. But District Attorney Alex Hunter declined to sign the indictment. He determined that the evidence was insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment was sealed. The public would not learn about the grand jury's vote for another 12 years. Nearly 30 years after the murder of JonBenét Ramsey, investigators, journalists, and researchers continue to debate three primary theories about what happened. Each theory has evidence. Each theory has problems. And none has ever been proven. The first theory is that an unknown intruder entered the Ramsey home on Christmas night, killed JonBenét, and wrote the ransom note in an attempt to disguise the crime. Supporting this theory, the unidentified DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. The fact that no member of the Ramsey family was ever convicted or formally charged. the existence of an unlatched basement window, and the analysis of investigators like former FBI agent John Douglas, a pioneer of criminal profiling, who reviewed the case and concluded that the evidence was more consistent with an intruder than with a family member. The problems with this theory: no intruder has ever been identified despite decades of investigation. No footprints were found in the snow. The ransom note was written on materials inside the house. And the amount of the ransom, matching John Ramsey's bonus, suggests someone with specific knowledge of the family's finances. The second theory, the one that drove public suspicion for years, is that one or both of JonBenet's parents were involved in her death. Supporting this theory, the grand jury's 1999 vote to indict. The handwriting similarities noted between the ransom note and Patsy Ramsey's writing. The fact that the garrote was fashioned from Patsy's own paintbrush. The matching ransom amount to John Ramsey's bonus. And the delayed, attorney-mediated cooperation with investigators. The problems with this theory: no physical evidence directly connecting either parent to the crime. The unidentified DNA, which remains the most objective piece of forensic evidence in the case, does not match either Ramsey. Patsy Ramsey was never conclusively identified as the ransom note's author. And in 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office issued a formal letter to the Ramsey family stating that new DNA technology had, quote, eliminated John and Patsy Ramsey as suspects. Patsy Ramsey did not live to see that letter. She died of ovarian cancer in June 2006. The third theory is perhaps the most psychologically complex. It holds that JonBenet's death may have begun as an accident, and that whatever happened was then concealed by staging the scene to appear like a kidnapping. This theory attempts to explain the strange combination of evidence: a child found inside her own home, a ransom note written on household materials, forensic signs of prior trauma alongside the acute injuries, and the behavior of the family in the hours that followed. The problem with this theory is that it requires a specific sequence of events for which no direct evidence exists. It is more speculative than the other two, and it has never been formally advanced by any law enforcement agency. 3 theories. Nearly 30 years. No conviction. The JonBenét Ramsey case did not end with a verdict. It simply continued. John Ramsey eventually moved away from Boulder. He remarried. He ran unsuccessfully for a seat in the Michigan state legislature. He has spoken publicly about the case in interviews and in a book he co-wrote with Patsy before her death. He has never wavered from his position: an intruder killed his daughter. In 2006, a man named John Mark Carr confessed to the killing from Thailand, claiming he had been present at the scene and that JonBenet's death was an accident. The confession generated enormous media attention. Carr was extradited to the United States. His DNA did not match the DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. All charges were dropped. Carr's confession was deemed false. In 2010, Boulder County District Attorney Mary Lacey formally requested that all investigative materials be transferred to the Boulder Police Department, along with a letter acknowledging that the new touch DNA technology had identified a consistent unknown male profile across multiple items of JonBenet's clothing. The case was, officially, still open. Still being investigated. Still waiting for a match. As of today, no one has ever been arrested, charged, or convicted for the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. The case remains officially open. Nearly 3 decades have passed. Investigators have examined thousands of leads. Experts have testified before grand juries. Journalists have written books. Filmmakers have produced documentaries. DNA has been tested with technology that did not exist when JonBenét was alive. And still, no one has been held accountable for the death of a 6-year-old girl. The house on 15th Street has had other owners for years now. The Christmas decorations that were up on December 26, 1996, are long gone. The snow has melted thousands of times since that morning. But for investigators, for researchers, and for the family that lost her, that morning has never entirely ended. The unidentified DNA still sits in a database, waiting to be matched. The ransom note still sits in evidence, still being analyzed. And somewhere, the answer to what happened in that house on Christmas night is still waiting to be found. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? What do you believe happened to JonBenét Ramsey? Was it an unknown intruder, the stranger who left no trace except a strand of DNA? Was it someone closer to home? Someone who has never faced justice? Or is the truth something that investigators have not yet fully assembled? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this documentary valuable, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We cover real cases with the depth and respect they deserve. Thank you for watching. And thank you for remembering JonBenét Ramsey.